morning, everyone.
Good morning.
First of all, some of you might know me, some of you might not. I'm Bishop Myron Cotta, Auxiliary Bishop of the Diocese. And as I'm approaching 2 years of ordination come next month, as part of all of these up until this time has been very much, getting acquainted with the diocese and getting to know some of the ministries and outreach and all different fields of ministry. One of the most important that here in the diocese is the outreach to the incarcerated. And so as I arrived here and ordained, and Bishop Soto said, I need some help with this. So along with Rich Fowler, we've been trying to reach out and see what already exists, what type of working relationship we already have with some of the facilities and the personnel, and what's going on in the parishes, how many people are volunteering to go make visitations, for example, and teaching, catechizing, all of that, and where's the role of the priests in all of this. So it's just very timely that as we were working on all of this, trying to pull this together, that Pope Francis decides that he's going to declare this a year of mercy. And so with that year of mercy, one of those corporal works of mercy that Jesus asks us to be part of has to do with visiting those in prison, those who are incarcerated. And we know that it is really for the parish, an extension of the parish, that those pastors, those administrators living within a deanery or the county where one of the facilities might exist, actually that population is part of your parish, your parishioners. And so it's this important outreach to always take that into consideration as part of the bigger picture and the community, part of the kingdom that's present even in those facilities. And so today is about kind of working together, getting to know each other, seeing already what exists, and then in the afternoon we'll have a time to break up into the groups that are representative from the counties and those who are some of the personnel from the counties' facilities, and they will meet then with the volunteers and meet with the priests, deacons, those who are here in this room, in different locations here in the building. That will be in the afternoon. But welcome. This is a tremendous turnout, and this is, again, one of the dreams and desires of Bishop Soto, to really get this on track and to really have a great sense of networking and moving this part of ministry forward, because it is a ministry that is very important to us. And of course, it comes from Christ himself. So we have to listen to what he has to tell us. I'm going to start off just kind of with a little story. It has to do with not so much a story, but a reflection on a gospel. And the gospel has to do with Mark's, well, several here, but it talks about the man who was possessed, and he was just going crazy. He lived in a cemetery, and he was, they couldn't keep him bound. He was terrorizing people in the community. He was out of control. He was hurting people. He was, the crime figure in that community, so to speak. And people didn't know what to do with him. And all of a sudden, there's an encounter. Pope Francis talks about the encounter with Jesus. And when Jesus comes into the picture and confronts this individual, this man is set free. He's liberated. He finds there's an alternative to his life, a newness about his life. Jesus frees him. And that's where all of us come in. We bring in the presence of Christ to those who are bound, to those who are oppressed, to those who are imprisoned, to those who are caught up for whatever reasons, be it, in this case, demonic, mental illness, whatever the case may be, that we bring the presence of the risen Jesus into that situation and have that encounter. And sometimes we think, it's too much to take. Maybe we're not capable of doing this, have the capacity to do this, have the gifts to do this, but it doesn't take a whole lot, to have the encounter and to bring, again, the presence of Jesus in our lives they're in an environment where sometimes you wonder, where is God? And those who are present there are maybe wondering the same thing. And so we bring some sense of an ability there, an opportunity there for them to be set free, little by little maybe, but still bringing the good news to them and being, again, the other very important thing in the year of mercy that Pope Francis is saying, being present. That's very, very important. At the parish level and outside the parish, wherever we go, whatever specialized ministry, are we bringing the true presence of Jesus there with us? And so we look at this idea of doing our role of helping to set people free. And we're going to kind of begin here with a little prayer. And you'll see in your packet, there's a prayer, a restorative justice prayer. And I believe we have individuals to kind of help with the prayer. I'll start it off, and then we'll go from there. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Compassionate Lord, heal the victims of crime who live with scars.
Lift to eternal peace those who have died. Grant the victims' families forgiveness that heals. Let your spirit of hope sustain those who are incarcerated. Support Christian families with your loving presence.
Send positive people into the lives of worldlings who walk with them into society.
Re-enter society.
Give wisdom to lawmakers,
To those who judge. Instill patience in those who guard.
Make those who guard justice bearers of your light for all of us who need your healing.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. This time we're going to go through a few slides and that are here in the PowerPoint, and just kind of walk through them quickly, and then continue to moving on with our program for today. The first slide we see, again, the mandate from Jesus himself. I was in prison and you visited me, from Matthew's Gospel. You know, this is a key directive from Jesus himself to act with compassion and act with the sense of love for those incarcerated. The Bible refers to prison, prisoners, or imprisonment more than 130 times. I never realized that. But it comes to our attention. It isn't something hidden in there. It's something for us to discover, and what do we do about it? You know, chaplains cannot do all of the necessary work themselves, so that's why we're all here today. We need many more people needed in this outreach of ministry. And every person incarcerated, there are 3 to 5 other people affected, including, you know, partners, children, parents, friends. You know, the ripple effect of all this. So, you know, there's all those needs out there too, besides those incarcerated. But what about their families, outreach to their children, all those type of areas that sometimes maybe we don't think about enough. Or we're thinking just of those individuals in prison, in jail, but what's happening with their family? What's going on there? But I was in prison and you visited me. Our second slide has to do with our diocesan mission statement, which I think is very important because it really encompasses all that we do. You know, from Galt all the way up to Alturas and Tule Lake, all the way over to Benicia, Vallejo, all the way to the Nevada border. That's a lot of area. That's a lot of people. That's a huge church, a diocesan church. And here's our statement. We, the people of God of the Diocese of Sacramento, guided by the Holy Spirit. We always have to come back to that. Who's empowering us to do all that we do? We are called by Jesus himself, by Christ, to proclaim the good news of the kingdom of God. And this is how we do it. Through prayer, through praise, through the sacraments, and then to witness the gospel values, those values that are love, justice, forgiveness, and service, and here's the kicker, to all. Not to just some, not to the selected few, not to special interest groups, but to all throughout the diocese, all encompassing. So it's a beautiful diocesan mission statement here for the Diocese of Sacramento, and sometimes maybe we don't break it down enough and kind of reflect on it even at the parish level, at meetings maybe, just to kind of regroup and say, okay, what is the mission statement that we're supposed to be upholding? So it's a good thing to kind of hang on to and to review, at the parish level for sure, and the different groups within the parish. As I mentioned earlier, we're in a Jubilee year of mercy that Pope Francis designated, which is a gift to not only the church, but I believe it's a gift to the world, because it's having an impact outside of the Christian world, outside of the believer even. The way he's projecting, his presence again, the encounter he's bringing, and being Jesus. It was very interesting being back in Washington, D.C. for his visit, and how people, were the comments you would hear, on television and all, and, why is he so special to you? And they would say whatever it was, and, it's him, he's just something else, this personality, and people don't even know really what they're attracted to is Jesus. That's who they're being attracted to. What he's doing is what Christ taught. So you're being attracted to the gospel of Jesus, and you don't even know it. And so that people need to come to that realization through us, through our presence. That's what makes the difference, this relationship with Christ. So the Jubilee year encompasses all that, and you could see there a quote from him. And at the very bottom it said, "Let us rediscover these corporal works of mercy," along with the spiritual, but those tangible things, to feed the hungry, to give drink to those who are thirsty, to visit the sick, to welcome the stranger, to clothe the naked, and then to visit the imprisoned, and to bury the dead, to bring dignity to those, the faithful departed. But again, in that list of corporal works of mercy, we have that important aspect of the specialized sense of mercy of ministry to the imprisoned. And so that's all included in our Pope's challenge of how to embrace this special year, along with the spiritual works of mercy too. The Catholic approach, the responsibility, rehabilitation, and restoration from the U.S. bishops that came out in 2001. There's a little booklet. It's great to explore it if you haven't. And it really gives it a nice insights. And now I'm one of those bishops. I'm part of the group. But of course, all that coming in before I was ordained. But anyway, it's something to embrace. The Catholic approach begins with the recognition that the dignity of the human person applies to both the victim and the offender. As bishops, we believe that the current trend of more prisons and more executions with too little education and drug treatment does not truly reflect Christian values and will not really leave our communities safer. We are convinced that our tradition and our faith offer better alternatives that can hold offenders accountable and challenge them to change their lives, reach out to victims, and reject vengeance, and to restore a sense of community and revisit the violence that has engulfed so much of our culture. So as bishops, we offer a word of thanks and support to those who devote their lives and their talents to the tasks of protection and restoration, those chaplains and prison ministry volunteers, police, correction officers, prosecutors, defense attorneys, and counselors. All of you here too, in your role. We call on others to join them in a new commitment to prevent crime and to build lives and communities. And so, it sums that up again. What's the alternative to what already exists? And again, it's a different way of looking at a situation that brings the sense of life into this, conversion into this change, into this transformation. And so That's our Catholic approach of responsibility, rehabilitation, and restoration. Today, actually, the main purpose of today is the following, and it's to really affirm the importance of being of service, to those who are incarcerated in our county jails. And then to begin the process of learning how to do this ministry, but do it very well. Not just a hit and miss thing. And I think that's what's kind of happened. Again, getting to see what the history is here a little bit. It's been kind of hit and miss, and we just cannot have hit and miss anymore. This has to be something that is working together, cohesive, complementing, networking, supporting one another with the same goal. And I think that's what Bishop Soto is really hoping that comes out of what we're trying to do here at the diocesan level, and then with the help and cooperation of all of you and those who are not in this room today that are involved, couldn't be here today. So we're to begin that process. That's what today's about, and also then to create teams of willing and prepared volunteers, my brother priests, brother deacons, the religious, lay leaders in ministry in the parishes, to help with the spiritual needs of the incarcerated, and in the following areas. And these were the areas of focus that Bishop Soto wanted me and along with Rich to focus on. Solano, Yolo, Placer, and Sacramento County jails. And we have those representatives here today, which God bless you for being here. You've committed to come here on a Friday, and here you are. And we are very, very grateful that you're here. And I am very grateful for my brother priests that are here and deacons, religious that are responded to the invitation to be here and to get connected in a deeper way with this specialized ministry. And so we open our minds and hearts to the empowerment of the Holy Spirit today. And with that, I hand this over to my right hand, to Rich, and he'll kind of go over some of the details of today and introduce our guest speaker. Thank you.
Well, the first thing that I want to say is how wonderful it is to see you all. When we first started thinking about this meeting, we thought, man, if we could get 50 people, that would be great. Well, it's more like 100. And I guess that in addition to saying thank you to Bishop Cotta for the opportunity to work with you in putting this together, I think that we started with an incorrect assumption. And the incorrect assumption was, we got to get something started in those county jails. Not much is going on out there. I think what we learned is that a lot is going on in the county jails, that a lot of work is being done, and frankly, a lot of you have been doing that work for a long, long time. And what's been missing is us. I mean, what's been missing is a coherent effort on the part of the diocese to say thank you, to provide support, to help to build this ministry into a much more robust effort. And so I guess I want to say I'm really happy to be a part of building the diocesan part of this, and to say thank you for those of you who have been working so long. I also have the wonderful job of introducing the speaker for today. The bishop you may know already. But before I do that, I just wanted to say a word about how we are going about today. And the first thing that's going to be happening is that George Horan, Father George Horan, will be speaking, and he'll be going for about 2 hours. And I'm going to introduce him in a minute, but I've been thinking all morning about what is it in my head about George Horan. And I've been in meetings with George for a long, long time. And you've heard that comment, when E.F. Hutton speaks, people listen. Well, when George Horan speaks, I mean, people listen. I mean, every time I have been in a session with him, people turn their heads and listen, because he is a voice of experience, He is a voice of someone who has been doing this ministry for a long time. He is a priest, and his priestly job has been to provide ministry in the jails. And so we are really fortunate to have him here. But what I want to also say is that that we see this not as the end-all and be-all. You're not going to learn in 2 hours how to be good chaplains. I mean, that's simply not going to happen. We see this as a starting point. We see it as an orientation. We see it as a challenge. We see it as giving you some of the things that you need to do. And then we're going to have lunch. We're going to order 100 more sandwiches than we thought we could. You may get a little teeny sandwich, but slender. We're going to have a slim group of chaplains. And then we are going to break out into groups, and we're going to break out by county. And as the bishop said, we have the county personnel for each of our counties here to welcome you, to thank you, and to say, hey, we have some rules and regulations, and we want you to know what they are. So we will have lunch from about 12:30 to 1:15, and then by 1:30 we will be off in various rooms, and I'll go over that with you later so you know where you're going to go. The color coding was to try to tell you what county you have indicated to us that you're a part of, and we'll go through all that later. So I mean, all this stuff is about George. He's a great man. I'm not going to go through all that. What I want you to know is that he is really good at his job, and we are really happy he's here. So let's welcome George Horan. That's fine.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, George.
Do all of you know Debbie McDermott?
No.
California Catholic Conference of Bishops, the person who coordinates all the restorative justice work for the whole state of California. She's right over here on the end there. And today is her birthday. So I think we should all start by singing happy birthday to Debbie, okay? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Debbie. Happy birthday to you. What a great way to spend your birthday, Debbie. I could just start by thinking about us. Who are we in these ministries and things that we do? And this was given to me quite a while ago, and I just thought it's kind of interesting because sometimes the least person you expect ends up doing things for God. A lot of times he doesn't ask our permission. He just kind of gets us in there. This is a memorandum dated 30 AD to Jesus of Nazareth from the Management Consultants of Galilee regarding your personnel profile results. It says, thank you for submitting the resumes of 12 men you have picked as the managers of your new organization. We have run their profiles through our usual battery of tests and are enclosing the results. Permit us to make a few general observations about the type of person you have selected. Most of these candidates seem to be of a rather ordinary type, not of the distinguished caliber we prefer for top management positions. Their character types and backgrounds do not seem particularly suited for the kind of efficiency, loyalty, and bold vision that your organization might demand. We are particularly concerned about Simon Peter, the man you are considering for the leader of your group. Our personality tests indicate an unstable disposition. He is highly emotional, likely to be impulsive and overly enthusiastic when excited, but defensive or even given to ventilating feelings through cursing or weeping when under pressure. He has an exaggerated opinion of himself, the kind that thinks he can walk on water, but in reality is likely to sink like a rock. We tend to think that when his loyalty to you and your organization is tested, he will fail. A man like this is hardly the kind of foundation on which to build your church or someone you could count on in a storm. However, we are pleased to note great potential in one of the candidates you are considering. He is a man of talent, resourcefulness, and character. He meets people well, has many good contacts. In addition, he has ambition and shows strong tendencies to fiscal responsibility. We highly endorse your choice of Judas Iscariot. Best wishes to you and your new venture. I think at times we look around and wonder how we got called to do this. And it's the wisdom of God. Jesus knows who we are. He's calling us to be his ministers. He knows what we can do. And maybe we don't know that. And maybe other people's look and say, why did you choose that person to do this? And we just honestly don't know sometimes. But I think it's important for us to put our work in context. We have been chosen and sent. Put it into context, and the bishop shared with us some of the quotes from the bishop's their pastoral letter, I guess it was, on restorative justice. And it really is important to read that. Really, the bishops were prophetic in writing that document. And it really set a whole new tone for us as people who are working in this kind of ministry. So I really would encourage you to read that. And if you read on page 9 of that, there's a reflection of a prison chaplain. He's an amazing person. That's me. That was my reflection in there. So that's why. We actually, from our office of Restorative Justice in LA, we helped to write the document. So that's why I'm really high on this. I think it's great. But it really, the bishops really took a step forward. And it was kind of brought to our attention through Sister Helen Prejean. Some of you know of her. She wrote Dead Man Walking. And she said when she went to her first clemency hearing for Patrick Saunier, and she got up and talked about how it would be a real shame to execute this man, to execute anyone, talked of her values and the changes that he had made in all of this. And afterwards, the two families, the two couples whose children he had killed, came up to her and said, you know, sister, we're all Catholics. And we think it's great that you are walking with Patrick on this journey, and we hope that he has found some peace with his God. But who reached out to us? No one from the church came forward to talk to us. And that's when Sister Helen said she knew if she was going to have any credibility in the work that she did, that she had to make sure that she reached out to all the people who were involved in the criminal justice process. And that's what restorative justice is. And that's when we changed our name of our office in LA from the Office of Detention Ministry to the Office of Restorative Justice, and realizing what we had to do. You have one of the handouts there, this one that says 2 different views.
Tell me where it is in the package. It's on the left side in the back.
It's in the left side on your packet. The first, there's those 3 that are stapled together.
Yeah.
It just says 2 different views. Howard Zehr was kind of the father of restorative justice in the United States. He wrote a book called Changing Lenses, and this was kind of from his. And he looks at the view of restorative justice, or of criminal justice that we have, and what he feels is the view of restorative justice that we should have. You see there the contrast between the two. Our criminal justice system says crime is a violation of the law and the state. Restorative justice says crime is a violation of people and relationships. If you go to court and they call a case, it's the people of California versus John Doe. It's not the victim of his crime isn't mentioned. It's not that this wasn't a crime against the victim, a human person. This is a crime against the law. That's how it's looked at. And restorative justice says we have to look at this as this is the violations of people and relationships. And if we're going to make a difference, we have to view it in that way. Criminal justice says violations create guilt. Restorative justice says violations create responsibilities. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a while, or obligations. Criminal justice says justice requires the state to determine blame, guilt, and impose pain, punishment. Restorative justice says justice involves victims, offenders, and community members in an effort to put things right. And finally, the central focus of criminal justice is offenders getting what they deserve. The central focus of restorative justice is victims' needs and offenders' responsibility for repairing harm. That's what restorative justice is about. And I think it's, Howard Zare does a great job of summing it up at the bottom there. The three questions that are asked in the criminal justice system: what laws have been broken, who did it, what do they deserve? The restorative justice questions are: who has been hurt, what are their needs, and whose obligations are these needs to take care of them? So what the difference is, really in short, is that restorative justice says if crime causes harm, justice should be healing. And that's what we're about. If you're in any form of this, in jail ministry, in victim ministry, in working with parolees, working with the people who do these jobs, that healing is what it's all about. And that's why this year of mercy is just perfect for us in this kind of ministry. It's perfect for us to really look at what we're called to do, and that is to help people heal. There's a wonderful man in San Diego named Azim Kamisa. Some of you may have heard of him. Azim's only son, Tariq, who was 20, was killed delivering a pizza, working his way through college as a gang initiation by someone, by a little guy named Tony, who was 15 at the time. And Azim, who is a Sufi Muslim, afterwards was just trying to figure out, what do I do with this? And his imam just sat down with him and says, you have to do something to honor your son and to have your son live on in that way. And so Azim called Ples Felix, who was the grandfather of Tony, who had killed Tariq, and he said, we need to do something to stop youth violence. And so the two of them got together and founded the Tariq Kamisa Foundation, and their logo, or their motto is, there's a victim on both sides of the gun. And so when we say we're doing victim ministry, it's not just the people who's had the loved one killed, it's also the person who did the killing, who probably was a victim long before they became a victimizer. Simple example, Isaac, who's in our victim offender education group at one of the prisons that we do this at, telling his story, and the very first memory he has as a 5-year-old was his mother's ex-boyfriend coming over and slitting the throat of her current boyfriend in front of him. He was 5 years old. Nothing was ever done to help him heal from that. His mother was a drug addict, would drop him off and leave him for days on end. At 11, he left home for the streets. At 17, he killed a rival gang member and was put in prison for 50 years. He was a victim that was never helped. And that's what, I think in this ministry that we're doing inside with the prisoners, is helping them, first of all, heal from what happened to them. Because as we say, hurt people hurt people. Healed people heal people. And so whatever we're doing in there, in the long run, we're helping them to heal from what happened to them. And that's probably the best way ever that you're going to stop them from victimizing again. And so it is a healing ministry that we're doing inside. And it takes all different kinds of forms. And so, but it is the ministry of Jesus. You know, I really believe that. And this year of mercy, I think this comes through, as the bishop said there, with you know, the corporal works of mercy there. Rita Chairez is our victim advocate that works with us. She has 2 brothers who were murdered. She's an incredible woman, does a lot of work with victims, with support groups. She goes in the prison, in the jails, does work with them. And her granddaughter, who was just she's 8 years old, has fallen madly in love with Pope Francis. And she just gets so excited if she sees a picture of him. And she got one of the cards of the Year of Mercy. On the back, she's looking at it. She says, yeah, you know, she says, Grandma, I do this. She says this where it says to feed the hungry and give drink to the thirsty. She says, well, Abuelita, that's her great-grandmother who lives with her. She says, I give her food and water, so I'm doing that one. And then she says, you know, and sometimes, you know, after her clothes are dried and stuff, I bring them to her, so I'm clothing the naked, so I'm doing that one. And she's going through this whole list of them, and she says, and you know, we went to a funeral the other day, so we're burying the dead, so I'm doing that one. And she says, and then I visit the prisoners, and her mother says, wait a minute, you don't visit the prisoners. She says, well, you do, and that's good enough. That's close enough for me. So I'm going to take credit for it, okay? So I'm going to do all of these, because Pope Francis said I need to do that. What I'd like to do now with you is to, I've been in, when I started this ministry, and had been in about 10 years, the inmates used to start telling me, you know, you've got a 15 to life sentence. And then I passed the 15-year mark. No, it's 25 to life. And then I passed the 25-year mark, and they said, you know, life without. You've got life without the possibility of parole here. So, and this is just some of the things that I've found in my 29 years of working in jails and prisons and with the victims. And some of it is, I think, will be helpful to you. Some of it may not affect you. And so just take what is helpful for you, and the rest just kind of cast aside and keep doing it. And so what I'd like to do is go through what I believe is the ministry of Jesus, look at what Jesus did through different characteristics that I think were Jesus' characteristics and what we have to have if we're going to be doing this ministry, and just kind of walk through that and hopefully get some kind of an idea of what I believe we're called to do in this kind of ministry and what we need to kind of have with us. And the first is the focus. You know, we always hear a lot of times, especially with people who have done great harm, you hear it from their families, you hear it from parole officers, you hear it, you know, we said this person has changed. And they say, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. That's not Christ's vision. Christ's vision is, I'll see it when I believe it. If we honestly believe the person is capable of change, we're going to see that change happening. If we don't believe that they're capable of change, we're not going to see it. My aunt, my oldest aunt, she's passed away now. She was born and raised in Ireland and came over here when she was 16. But her husband smoked cigars for 56 years of their married life. She hated it. She complained about it almost every day. And he finally decided he was going to quit. He quit smoking cigars. For 1 year after that, she was still complaining about his cigar smoking. She didn't believe he could do it, so she didn't see that he had stopped smoking. And I think that we put these blinders up, and Jesus says, get rid of all that stuff. You know, who is this person? And I love the Isaiah quote. You know, God says, I'm going to do all these things for you. Why? Because you're precious in my eyes and glorious, and I love you. That's who we are. And to Adam and Eve, you know, the creation of man and woman, they looked down and said, this is very good. That's who we are. Do we believe that? Because if we believe it, we're going to see it in that other person. And that's what we're called on to do, is to see in the other person who they really are. And so when we finally do see it, when we do believe it, then we're going to see it at that point. There was a young woman named Melissa whose brother had been murdered. And someone talked her into going into a jail with her to do a visitation there. And Melissa says, she said she went in with a view of who she was going to meet there. She said, I begin to see in these, quote, monsters, some guilty of murder or rape or robbery, what I never expected to see, humanity. I saw in the eyes not the evil I expected to see, but pain. same pain any human being feels after they have been hurt so much that there seems to be nothing left in the world but more pain. So who do you see when you go in? That's going to determine a whole lot about what happens. And the other thing is, who is your God? Because that's going to determine a whole lot of what happens too. When working with a lot of the folks inside prison, inside jail, we find that their God is a vengeful God. And you hear all the time, I deserve to be here. I deserve to be punished. I deserve all of this. You know, that's the only way that I'm going to make it through this is God has to punish me for this. And you start talking about a loving God, and they don't know what you're talking about. So who is the God that you bring in with you? Because that's going to determine a whole lot about what you're going to be saying and doing in this place that you're going. The first and really most important aspect of ministry, and we see it in Jesus all the time, is presence. Just being there. Sometimes not saying anything. Just being there is really important. We have to realize that when we go in as Catholic volunteers, Catholic chaplains, whatever, that it's not just us. We're representing God. We're representing our church. We're representing the community we come from. And it's interesting, in our jail, we have what we call the high power unit. These are people that can't come out to the chapel or to our office, that we have to go and walk the rows. We just go cell to cell, walk in the rows there. And there's a custom in our jail that when someone comes onto the row, that the guy in the first cell yells, so everyone can hear, front to back, and then whoever is coming. And so it's really interesting. When one time we went on the row and the guy in the front cell says, front to back, the church is here. Not the chaplain, the church is here. And that's the truth. That's the truth. We are the church. And so we are the representative of Christ. And you'll be called all kinds of things. You know, we get called chaplain, priest, preacher, minister, all kinds of things when you're there. We have the head chaplain at our main jail is a woman named Patty, and everyone calls her Sister Patty. And when the Cardinal was there for Christmas one year, and all these inmates were saying, hi, Sister Patty, hi, Sister Patty, and he says, Patty, didn't I meet your son and your husband? She says, I know, but one of the inmates called me Patty once, and the deputy said to him, you can't call her that. Call her Chaplain Bartlett. And Patty says, no way. I'm not. He said, okay, then call her Sister Patty. And that's gone on for years now. And Sister Patty. And so they don't know exactly what a nun is, a lot of them, but they know that she's special, and so she's Sister Patty. You know when they said the name of the Savior is going to be Emmanuel, meaning God is with us. That's what we bring, God being with these people. Being there is most important. Being there is most important. There's a woman named Debbie Morris, and she wrote a book called Forgiving Dead Man Walking. Debbie had been kidnapped, and she and her boyfriend had been kidnapped by his name slipped my mind. He was the second person that Sister Helen Prejean walked with on death row. And they shot her boyfriend, left him for dead. They shot him in the head, and he amazingly survived. They kept Debbie captive for about 3 days and continually raped her. And she finally escaped. And she started going through her own process. And she ended up writing the book called Forgiving Dead Man Walking. And in that book, she talks about how she also appreciated the fact that Sister Helen was walking with this guy, because she said he obviously needed someone to be with him. But she said, but who was with me? What do you say to an 18-year-old who saw her boyfriend shot in the head, who had been raped over 3 days, a number of times by 2 men? What do you say to her? And most people couldn't figure that out, so they just didn't even go and see her. So she said she basically had to walk this journey by herself. And so sometimes we're not going to, what do you say to an 18-year-old who gets sentenced to life without the possibility of parole? And a lot of times we don't know what to say, and so we avoid it. And the most important thing, a lot of folks talk about, a lot of the victims we work with on the outside talk about the fact that when my son was killed, I don't remember anything anyone said to me, but I remember who was there. So what they said didn't make any difference at all. They were there, and that's the most important thing. And so we have to just realize that just being there is the most important thing that we do. One of the guys that we've had contact with, the chaplains at the jail, he just wrote this note. He said, "I wish that I had the words to tell you how much I appreciate all that you have done for me. A simple thank you does not seem to be appropriate. Just you coming to see me and taking time to talk to me has meant more to me than anything else you could have done for me. Even though I am in this place, sometimes I feel better about myself and happier than I have been for a very long time." Just because people came to be with them. So don't underestimate the fact, trying to figure out, what am I going to say, what am I going to do, what's with the agenda I have, all this kind of stuff. The most important thing is just you walking in there and being with them. I think the second really strong characteristic of Jesus and of us is compassion. We all know the Good Samaritan story. And it just shows, the person who, this story, I hate reading this gospel as a priest. Because who's the first one that comes by the guy? The priest. And he walks way around, I don't. He's on his way to the temple and says, if that guy's dead and I touch him, then I become impure. And if he's Samaritan and I touch him, I become impure. And I can't go to the temple and do my job. So my job is more important than helping this guy, so he goes around it. And then the scribe, following behind, sees what the priest did and says, "Oh, he's not going to do it, I can't do it either." It's finally the Samaritan that comes along. And it says, in the end, when Jesus says to the people he's talking to, "Who was it that was neighbor to the man?" He said, "The one who treated him with compassion." The other interesting thing about that parable is the man didn't say the Samaritan because he was Jewish, and he could never give credit to a Samaritan because of this them and us kind of thing. And that's another thing we've got to get rid of is them and us. It's just all us. And so compassion is really, really important because a lot of the folks that we work with have never experienced compassion in their life. They certainly aren't getting it by the criminal justice system that they're involved with. And so Jesus says at the end of that parable to the guy, he says, "Go and do likewise. Be compassionate." That's what Jesus tells us to do. Touch is very important in expressing compassion. And in our system, it's a lot of times forbidden. We have big signs in our jail, absolutely no physical contact. And there's reasons for that. In their minds, there are good reasons for that, and some of them we can really understand. But it really is tough. We have got permission in our jail that we can at least shake hands with the inmates that we're talking to. We can rest our hand on their shoulder when we're saying a prayer with them, something like that. We cannot hug. Hugging is not allowed at all. So if it's possible, but you always have to follow the rules of your institution. If you don't, you're going to be out of there. And then you're not going to be helping the folks. So you've got to follow the rules of your institution. But if you can talk to someone to find out, can we just do this? Touch is so important. There's a part of our prisons called the Security Housing Unit. And it's up at Pelican Bay at Corcoran State Prison. They had one at Tehachapi, but I believe the one there just closed. But there's no human contact there. Everything you do by yourself. So they'll pop your door open, you go to this other door, they pop that open, you go outside to the yard by yourself. The doors are popped for you to come back in, go back into your cell. No human contact. And one of the guys who came down from Pelican Bay, from the SHU unit, because he had an appeal on his case, he came down, and I was talking to him, and he said that about twice a year, he will do something that will force them to do a cell extraction. And a cell extraction is a violent thing. They come in with all their gear, with their pepper spray, and they basically come in and drag you out of your cell. And he says, I do that because I need someone to touch me, and there's no other way that can happen. As a human being, I need to be touched. Even if it's violent, I need to be touched to remind me that I'm human, and there is some kind of relationship that I have with other people. How sad is that? And so if there is, if your institution allows it, however you can touch, a shake of the hand, hand on the shoulder, whatever, really try to take advantage of that.
Father George?
Yes.
I was at Mass one time in prison, and obviously they touch each other with the sign of peace. They had a whole ritual though afterwards where they all went back to the back of the group, and they got the purifier, the hand purifier to clean their hands afterwards. It was kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, that's great, if they're allowed to do that, that's wonderful. We do that at our place. We have permission. We have a choir that comes in every Sunday. They've been coming for 16 years now. At the sign of peace, they go and shake hands with everyone in the chapel. And we're allowed to do that. In other places, they can't do that. So again, whatever the rules of your institution are.
How about if they're in hospital?
Pardon me?
When inmates are in a local hospital, you're allowed to touch?
I don't know. You'll have to. If an inmate is taken to a hospital, there's usually guards there.
Right.
And so I would ask the guard what's.
And they're chained to the bed.
Yeah, they're chained to the bed. Yeah. I mean,
Well, why can't you touch them, period? What is the reason behind not touching?
Well, part of it is you might pass something to them. You take a little packet of drugs out of your pocket, you shake hands, you're passing the drugs to them. They pass notes to each other. They might, in the view of a lot of the people inside these institutions, these are violent people. You shake hands with them, they might grab your hand, turn around, break your arm. That's what they're looking at. So they want to see this distance, to know that nothing is happening. So again, whatever the institution says, we follow. A lot of times we learn about Jesus through the inmates. Compassion. We had two guys in our jail, Ricky and Javier. Ricky was in a wheelchair because he had been shot in a drive-by shooting by rival gang members. He was paralyzed from the waist down. He was in the hospital unit, which is set up like a hospital. It has hospital beds and everything there. And they brought in another guy, Javier, who had been shot in the course of being arrested. He was paralyzed from the waist down and on his right side. He only had use of his left arm. As they were putting Javier into his bed, Ricky noticed that Javier had a tattoo from the gang that shot Ricky. So right away, his mentality as a good gang member, revenge. So he starts trying to think, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? How am I going to get this guy? And they brought dinner in. They had those, the trays that slide over the beds like we have in hospitals. They put the dinner on each of those, slid it over the bed. And Ricky starts eating, and he looks over at Javier and realizes Javier can't eat. Because if he pushed himself up with his left hand, he couldn't use his right hand because he was paralyzed. And something registered with Ricky. He said, suddenly I realized this is not a rival gang member. This is my brother. He needs my help. Ricky got out of his bed, wheeled himself over to Javier's bed, and fed him his dinner. And did that ever after. That's compassion. Compassion and recognizing humanity can overcome all kinds of things, even the brainwashing of a gang. So compassion is really, really important. Now by compassion, we don't mean that someone says, oh, I murdered someone. I said, oh, that's okay, don't worry about that. That's not compassion. Restorative justice, part of restorative justice is the person has to take responsibility for what they've done. But to keep saying, yeah, you're a murderer and you're never going to amount to anything and you're no good, and you know, thank God I'm here to bring God's mercy to you, otherwise you're lost forever. That's not going to be the helpful thing that we need. And so to be that compassionate is really, really important for us. Hope. In the institutions where we work, hope is really, really, really important. Again, when you have children, 18 years old, getting life without the possibility of parole, or 75 years to life, or something like that, if they don't have some kind of hope, what's there to live for? And so that's what we have to be, is be people of hope. I love that scene in the gospel where the woman, Jesus in that crowd, and the woman who has been hemorrhaging for years says, if I just touch the hem of his garment, I will be cured. The hope that she had, that's all I have to do. Just touch the hem of his garment. And she does it, and she's cured. That hope is what kept her going. Or that guy that's by the pool of Bethsaida there, it said, what, 30 years or something he's by the pool, and when the water stirs, whoever gets in the pool first gets cured. Can you imagine coming back for 30 years every day, hoping today's going to be your day? The hope that he has. And we're finding now we're getting some pretty good restorative justice legislation starting going, thanks to Debbie and the folks at the Catholic Conference. And you're seeing guys who think that there was no hope. We're saying now, you know, if I really behave myself in prison, I can come back after 25 years and have these enhancements dropped, and I can get out. You know, for someone 18, 19, 20, you might think 25 years, that's a long time, but they have that hope. It's a wonderful man who was probably one of the people who's had the most influence in my life on me. His name was Richard Mexico. Richard was one of the founders of the Mexican Mafia, which is a horrible organization. He was sentenced to death back in the early 70s. And Sister Elizabeth O'Keefe, who is now a chaplain down at in the prison in Chino, she was the chaplain at Men's Central Jail where Richard was. She got to know him when he was convicted and sentenced to death. She went up to death row to see him. And she came to his cell and said, Richard, you're not going to die on death row. And Richard laughed at her. And then he said, you know, sister, I'm sorry, but come on, really. Look at me. I'm a gang member. I've killed people. What could God possibly do with me? His own image of himself was stopping him from seeing this. What could he possibly do with me? She said, trust me, you're not going to die on death row. And so the following December 7th, which was Richard's birthday, the Supreme Court of the United States declared the death penalty in the United States unconstitutional as it was, and took everyone off death row. So here's Richard walking off death row on his birthday, saying, maybe that nun knows something I don't know. So he said, you know, I don't know what you have planned for me, Lord, but if you want to try to do something with me, I'll open my heart and give it a shot. And Richard ended up developing a program called Criminals and Gang Members Anonymous. He said he came to the realization that gang membership was actually a triple addiction. You're actually addicted to the gang, addicted to criminal activity, and addicted to chemical substances. If you don't treat all three addictions, you're probably going to keep doing that. This program now is spread all across the United States, over to Europe. We just found out recently that they're using it in Liberia with the child soldiers that they had developed over there before they got their democratic government in place to try to rehabilitate these kids. They're using his program there. It saved so many lives. Richard, at the beginning of each of the sessions, he would light what he called a candle of hope. And he said, he wrote a whole reflection on this. And he said, at the end of this reflection, I never realized a candle of hope was not intended to overpower the darkness, but rather be a sign the darkness would not overpower me. I never realized a candle of hope was not intended to overpower the darkness, but rather be a sign the darkness would not overpower me. when we come into these jail situations, we're not going to wipe out the darkness in these people's lives. But we may be that candle of hope that says, okay, I can keep going. That one candle of hope that really is important. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. That's great. Then he said later, you are the light of the world. So, whoa, wait a minute. And that's the truth. We are the light of the world. We're called to bring light into other people's darkness all the time. It's really needed in the darkness that we find in our criminal justice system. We had a guy at our jail who, so quite a while ago now, but he had been arrested. He was a first grade teacher, been arrested for child abuse. And the prosecutor in this case, this was going to be her case to make her name. She was all over the press. I'm going to get this guy 500 years. He'll never go and get out and do this to another kid. And Henry knew that he was innocent. But he said, you know, how am I going to prove it? It's my word against these kids. And he was married and had 4 kids. And so he thought, I don't want my family to have to go through this trial with all the publicity and everything else, so he decided he was going to kill himself. So he was sitting in his cell and he started to cry. And the guy in the cell next to him said, what are you crying about? We're men, we don't cry. And Henry, who had never been in jail or prison before, said, he told him the story. You'd never admit to child abuse in the prison. You will be killed by the other inmates. So he tells the whole story about what happened. And he says, but I'm not guilty of this. He says, yeah, we hear that all the time. But then the guy in the next cell says to him, okay, do you have a Bible? He says, no. He said, well, here's mine. And he pushed it out of his cell and was able to push it far enough that Henry could grab it and pull it in. And then Robert, that was the other guy's name, started saying, okay, go to this passage, go to this page. What does it say? The entire night he did that, having him look at different scripture passages. What is it saying? What is this saying? What is God saying about you and to you? At the end of the night, he decided, I'm not going to kill myself. So that would be wrong. That would be even worse for my family. He said, I'm going to fight this. And luckily, he did fight it, and the kids admitted that they had made it up because they were afraid of getting a bad grade from him, and he was released. But he said that the sad thing is, because this guy in the other cell, Robert, was in a very high-profile case. He had murdered, he was infatuated by this TV actress, went over to her house and shot and killed her. And he said, the sad thing is everyone is going to remember Robert Bardo as the man who killed Rebecca Schaefer. And no one is going to know that he not only gave me back my faith, he gave me back my life. He gave him hope. And that's what kept him going and what helped him to continue on and to finally be the one, be able to fight this and beat this case and get it out. He had that hope. A lot of times when we come in, we may be the only one in their lives who care about these people. That also gives them hope. And that's where this comes down to really a ministry of listening. That we really say that if you're going to do this work, probably 90% of the time you're quiet. 10% of the time you may be talking. Now, if you're leading a communion service or a mass, or if you're doing a Bible study or something like that, obviously you're going to do a lot more talking. But one-on-one is where so much of this happens. And so much of Jesus' ministry was the one-on-one contact. And that's when we have to be people who really listen. Those guys that are in our high-power unit that we can't see in our office, if we want to see them in our jail, we take them down to the attorney room. And so this guy named Gabriel wanted to see me, so I went down to the attorney room. We're sitting there, and across from each other, with a plate of glass between us, talking on a telephone. And Gabriel was, if you looked at him, this was the stereotypical gang member. Shaved head, young, lots of tattoos, looked hardened, and he's sitting there, and he starts, I said, well, Gabriel, what can I do for you? And he started talking. He only talked for about 7 or 8 minutes, and he started to cry. I said, Gabriel, what are the tears about? Because this is, again, in the culture there, you don't cry in front of other people. And then it happens a lot in our office, where we can see people, but not in public places like the attorney room. And the guy said, Gabriel, you know, what's going on? And he said, no one has ever listened to me before in my life. 19 years old. No one has ever listened to me. You don't know how powerful that is. Just listening. Encourage people to keep talking. It's amazing because a lot of times what happens is they find their answer. If we can give the people the answer, it may work, it may not work. If they find their own answer, which is what I believe one-on-one is all about and counseling is all about, is me asking questions so they find their answer, then it really has an impact. Just to let people talk. I remember, and this was when I was first ordained, and that's almost 44 years ago now. My first assignment, this woman made an appointment, she comes in, I sat down with her, I said, so what can I do for you? Well, I have this problem. She talked for 1 hour straight. I did not say one word. 1 hour straight. And I was, you know, the skills I had learned, you know, you keep nodding your head, encouraging, oh yeah. And at the end of the time, she says, thank you so much. You've been so helpful. I now know exactly what I have to do. And she walked out. Huh?
There you go.
So it really is important. If we listen, the healing that goes on, it's really, really important to us. They need to tell their stories. Both the victim and the offender, they need to tell their stories. And we have to give them the space and the place to do that, to tell their stories. And we have to shut up to make that happen sometimes, to let them do the talking. You know, we'll give them the intro, or they'll hear something. It's amazing to me the number of people who come to the Mass at the jail and then sign up to see the chaplain afterwards, because something hit them. Something triggered in them, and they now want to talk about that. And so oftentimes we just listen so we can really let them tell their stories, because it's really, really important. One of the guys at the jail sent this note to one of our chaplains. He said, I was the one who had told you had told to let my problem go and to forgive myself for what I did. I thank God every day for helping me get through this. When I left your office, I felt right then and there that God had taken all my problems away from me. And I thank God and you very much for listening to me when I needed someone. I don't remember telling him any of those things. But in the course of telling his story, he heard God speaking. And he heard those things, was what he needed to hear for himself to kind of keep going on and on. So we need to really make sure that we give time for people to tell their stories. It's really, really important for that to happen. The motivation of all of Jesus' ministry and of our ministry is love. You know, that has to be it. I don't know how long you've done this ministry, but if you're going into the jails or prison, somewhere along the line, someone, it might be a friend, it might just be someone you meet, and somewhere along the line you're going to get the remark, why do you want to spend time with them? You know, this whole us and them kind of thing. You know, we're the us, they're them. Why do you want to spend time with them? And what's the answer? Unconditional love. That's what we've been given. That's what we've been told to give away. That we need to just love. That's the important thing. We're not there to judge anyone. The courts do that, not well. The courts do that. One of our volunteers at our juvenile hall, I was really grateful that I was not in charge of the juvenile ministry, someone else was, because he had to deal with her, said to one of the inmates there, this young 16-year-old, said to him, God won't like you if you die with tattoos. So here's a guy, again, hoping to get some kind of love maybe here, instead getting judgment, getting this person's view of what should be. and probably turning it off. This is God talking to me. This is the chaplain, so this is God talking to me. Saying if I have these tattoos, God's not going to like me. None of us believe that. You know, we're called to love. We're not there to save anyone. We used to have, this was a long time ago, every month we have to do a report every month, how many people we had in services, how many people we had in Bible study, how many people we had one-on-ones, how many people we saw in the eternity room, how many death notifications we did. And at the end of it, there was an evangelical group that was in charge of overseeing ministry in the jails. This was their report. At the bottom it said, how many people did you save this month? And every month I'd write the same thing. None. Jesus did that 2,000 years ago. It's not my job. And it's true. We're not there to save anyone. We are there to remind them they've been saved. And we do that by loving them. Our main job there is not teaching doctrine, teaching prayers, giving information. That's not our main job. It's important. If someone wants to learn how to say the rosary, we teach them. That's important. If someone wants to learn more about the Catholic faith, we teach them. That's important. But our main job there is just to love. There's a great quote. This was actually written on the wall of St. John's University in their theology department. Someone wrote this graffiti. Jesus said unto them, who do you say that I am? And Peter answered, you are the eschatological manifestation of the ground of our being, the charisma in which we find the ultimate meaning of our interpersonal relationships and of the Trinitarian, Christological, sociological, authentic ecclesial mysteries. And Jesus said, what? We're not going in there as theologians. We're going in there as lovers, really. That's what we're going in to do. Everything we do should be motivated by love. Patty, who's everyone's mother at our jail, and I mean, she takes that seriously. She's 71 years old, has been in this ministry for about 18 years now. Unfortunately, had a son who was in prison also. But she tells these guys off, you know, as a mother, only a mother can. And one guy, he was taken to the whole, his mother had cancer and she couldn't come to visit him. Her only contact she could have with him was by phone. And then he did something stupid. He knew what he was doing though, and was sent to the hole. In the hole, no phones, none of this kind of stuff. So he was cut off from contact with his mom. And he kept coming to the office all the time, you know, I just love my mom so much. So Patty goes to his cell. She wakes him up. I don't want to ever hear you tell me you love your mother again. Because if you loved your mother, you wouldn't be here doing this. You would not have taken away her one form of communication with you. So you think about that while you're in the hole here. Then come see me when you get out. And as she walks away, the guy in the cell next to him said, who in the hell was that? And he says, that's Sister Patty. She loves me. Because how many people call them on things? Their whole life, people let them do all this stuff, thinking, yeah, that's just who you are. She says, no, that's not who you are. She got a letter, and this was a very telling thing for all of us. She got a letter from a guy who had been in our jail for a long time, serious gang member, one of the shot callers, and had a horrible life himself growing up. And he writes her a letter and says, Dear Sister Patty, I want to thank you for not talking to me about God while I was in Central Jail. It's not something a chaplain usually wants to hear. I want to thank you for not talking to me about God in Central Jail. And he goes on to explain, he says, I needed to talk through a whole lot of stuff. And he says, some of the other chaplains would come along and they'd ask, have you turned your life over to Jesus? And I say, yes, okay. He said they'd kind of notch their Bible and go on. I've saved that one. She said, but when you would come, you would say, what do you need to talk about? he says, "You taught me who Jesus was." And he got to prison. He dropped out of the gang. He started going to the Catholic services. He went to confession, received communion again. And he says, "That's because you didn't talk to me about God. You let me get off my heart when I needed to get off, and your love taught me who God was. So you really didn't have to say anything at all about God." The most powerful tool we have is love. It's important for us. They need to know who God is, and we need to show it to them and not just talk to them about it. Really show it to them. I have a friend that I've known for about 24 years now. He's been on death row for 21 years. Tracy, and he was 18 when he was arrested, put into prison. One year, it was close to his birthday, and I was up visiting him. And I said, "You know, Tracy, can I send you something for your birthday? And you can send books in, these quarterly packages or something." I said, "Can I send you something for your birthday?" He says, "No." He says, "Since I've been in prison here, I've come to realize there's only two things important in life: love and relationship." He said, "I now know who loved me because they're still coming to visit me. They're accepting my phone calls. They're writing to me. They're sending me some stuff. I'm in relationship with those people. I don't need anything else." He says, "I now realize that I am happier and more peaceful here in my cell on death row than I ever was out in the streets because I have love and relationships." Wow. How many people do we know? When I had that conversation with him, I was staying with friends up in Marin County. I went back to their house, and they were going to dinner that night with friends of theirs, and they invited me along. And this guy was a pediatrician, had a very successful practice, had a wife that was just gorgeous, and she seemed very loving. His kids, now maybe just because we were there, seemed like the perfect children you could ever want. He had this beautiful house up on the hills overlooking the bay, had this wonderful boat down at the dock in the bay, and he was one of the most miserable, unhappy people I had ever met. And I'm thinking, here's Tracy in his cell on death row saying, "I'm happier and more peaceful than I've ever been in my life because I have love and relationships." And here's this guy who has everything the society says should make you happy, and he was miserable. Love is what makes the difference, and that's what we have to bring. One of the saddest experiences I'd say that I've had in jail is I was down in the attorney room again with this young guy, and something came up about the love of God, and he looked puzzled. And so I asked him, I said, "John, who has loved you?" And he just sat there. And then I saw this one tear starting to come down his cheek. And he says, "You know, I don't think anyone has." He said, "When I was born, my mother left the hospital without me, and I've never seen her since." He says, "My father," and he said, "it could be a cultural thing with us. He may love me, but I don't know that he's ever shown it in any way." And he said, "So it's just," he says, "I don't know. How do you talk to someone about the love of God if they've never experienced love? You may be their one experience of love. You may be the one that turns that around." We had one of the guys, Isaac, that I talked about earlier, whose first remembrance was his mother's boyfriend getting killed in front of him. He had no respect for his own life or anyone else's. Life had no meaning for him. When he killed Victor, Victor was 21 when Isaac killed him. Isaac was 17. And Isaac said, "I really thought I was doing him a favor." Because as gang members, he said, "Whatever we're going to go to beyond this life has to be better than this." So he said, "I would go out every night hoping someone would kill me." And so when he went to court for his sentencing, he was going to just get up there, because he had a chance to speak, and he was just going to say, "You know, I don't care about any of you. No one cares about me. I don't care what you do. You can all go screw yourself." And But before he had a chance to do this, Victor's mother got on the stand. And she looked at Isaac and she said, Isaac, you are a very young man. You have a lot of life ahead of you. I know that you're better than the worst thing you've done, killing my son. And I know you can do some wonderful things in life. And I want you to know that I forgive you for what you did. And Isaac was called on, okay, Isaac, you can speak now. He couldn't talk. He didn't know what to say. And he says his initial reaction was he was afraid. He said, how can this woman love me like that? How can she do this? And he had never experienced love, so he was afraid. He didn't know how to do this. But then later on, he said, you know, this is amazing what she did. And he said, the rest of my life, I have to live by honoring her. He said, the only way I can do that is everything that I say, everything that I do has to be motivated by love. This one loving act changed Isaac's life completely. Completely. He had never experienced this from anyone else. And now he knew what love was. And it changed his life. He went from this angry young man to someone who's doing incredible things in prison. And he said, you know, if I don't get out, because he has 50 to life, he said, if I don't get out, he said, my life is going to mean something, even if it's just showing people in here what love is all about. Love is one of the most powerful things that we have and that we can use. So it's really important for us to do that. We're called to be love. That's the most important thing that we're going to do. And it's unconditional. That's the tough thing, is unconditional. No matter what happens, we keep loving. Doesn't mean we don't call them to responsibility, but we keep loving them no matter what. And a lot of them don't know how to deal with that. We had a guy named Jimmy in our jail, and Jimmy was, he was just one of these really nice guys who just couldn't get his act together. And he never did anything really bad. He just kept doing little things. He'd violate parole. You know, he never physically hurt anyone in that way. I'm sure psychologically he hurt some people when he did some of the stuff that he did. But he would get out and he'd keep coming back. We used to joke with him and said, you know what the rule is, Jimmy? If you come and have chaplain services of any kind, and you get out and come back, the rule is the chaplains will beat you up. And he looks at, really? I said, no, of course not. But he kept coming back. And finally one time, he had a friend in there, and so I said to him, I said, how's Jimmy? He said, oh, he's good, he's really good. He's really, really, really good. I said, he's here, isn't he? Oh, no, he's not here. Yes, he is. I can tell by your reaction. He's here. And he doesn't want me to know he's here, does he? He said, no, he's afraid. He came back again. He's afraid how you're going to react. And so I went and knocked on his door at the jail there, and I looked in, and he just put his head down. I said, so you're hiding from me, Jimmy? He says, yeah, because I don't think you're going to love me anymore. Because that's how he's been treated his whole life. You know, it's conditional love. You do this, this, and this, I'm going to love you. If you don't do that, I'm not going to love you. So a lot of them have no idea what unconditional love is. And we need to teach them that if they're going to understand what God's love is like. So it's really important for us to do that. And sometimes, you know, we look out at all of the people in our institutions and think, I can't help all these people. So I think of Mother Teresa when she was in Calcutta and saw all the people dying on the streets. And someone said, you can't help all of these people. She said, maybe not, but I can help this one right here. And that's what I'm going to do. And so what we do this one at a time. One at a time. That's what's important for us to do. We've been sitting for a long time. I think let's take a break. We'll come back and talk about forgiveness, okay? 10 minutes, okay?